My name is Dana Mercer. I'm 29 years old. And on a Sunday afternoon in February, I was sitting at my kitchen table doing my taxes when I opened a spreadsheet I hadn't looked at in 8 months and started adding up numbers I had always assumed were fine. They were not fine. $67,000 was gone. Not in one transaction, not in any way that would have shown up as an alarm. In withdrawals of $400, $650, $800, $1,100, spaced weeks apart, sometimes a month apart, always just under the threshold that would have made me look twice at any single statement. 4 years of careful, patient, deliberate withdrawals from the savings account I had been building since I was 19 years old. The account my father had helped me open. The account his name was still on. I sat at that kitchen table for a long time with the spreadsheet in front of me and the number at the bottom and the particular cold clarity of someone who has just understood something they cannot un-understand. Then I called him. Before I tell you what he said when I told him what I had found, drop your city and the time where you are right now. I want to know where this story reaches you. Now let me take you back 10 years, to the bank on Cartwright Avenue, and the afternoon my father sat across from me and helped me open the account that he would spend the next 4 years quietly emptying. My father, Gerald Mercer, was the kind of man who presented well. That is the most precise way I know to say it. He was tall and well-dressed, and had an easy confidence in social situations that made people trust him before he had done anything to earn it. He shook hands firmly. He remembered names. He had a way of making whoever he was talking to feel like the most important person in the room, which is a skill, a real one, and like most real skills, it can be used well or badly. He used it badly more often than anyone outside our family knew. My mother left when I was 12. Not dramatically. She didn't pack a bag in the night or leave a note. She sat my father down on a Tuesday evening and told him she was leaving, and she did. She moved 40 minutes away to a smaller apartment and called me every Sunday and took me for lunch every other weekend and was, in the years after, more present and more honest with me than she had ever been able to be when she was in the house with him. I asked her once, when I was older, why she had stayed as long as she did. She said, "Because he was very good at making you feel like the problem was you." I understood that sentence more than I wanted to. After my mother left, it was my father and me and my younger brother Caleb in the house on Desmond Street. Caleb was 9 when she left, easy and cheerful and young enough to adapt without the particular damage of understanding what was happening. He was my father's favorite in the way that second children sometimes become favorites, not because they are loved more, but because they require less management, because their compliance comes more easily, because they haven't yet developed the inconvenient habit of noticing things. I noticed things. I always had. It was a quality my father found useful when it served him and irritating when it didn't. When I was 14 and spotted an error in our tax return that saved him $2,000, he told everyone the story with pride. When I was 16 and pointed out in front of his friends that the story he was telling about a business deal had different details than the version he had told me, he didn't speak to me for 3 days. The lesson I learned from that particular silence, and from the ones that followed it, was that noticing was fine as long as I only noticed things my father had decided were appropriate to notice. Everything else was a problem with me. I spent most of my teenage years navigating that line. By the time I left for college, I was very good at it, which is not the same as being okay. I was also very good at managing money. That part came from my mother, who had grown up without much of it and had made herself expert at the careful, unglamorous work of keeping finances ordered. She had taught me to track spending, to understand statements, to read the fine print of anything I signed. By the time I was 18, I had a part-time job and a clear picture of where every dollar went, and a specific, concrete goal, a house eventually my own, with a door that had my name on the lease and a key that nobody else had a copy of. The savings account was the beginning of that goal. My father suggested the joint account. I want to be precise about that because the detail matters. It was his idea, not mine. I was 19, home for a college break, And I had mentioned I wanted to open a proper savings account for my house deposit goal, rather than keeping the money in my checking account where it was too easy to spend. He said he knew a good rate at the bank on Cartwright Avenue and that he could come with me since he banked there already, and it would be easier to set up with him there to vouch for me. I said okay. I did not think carefully about what joint account meant in practical terms. I was 19, and I trusted my father with the particular trust of someone who has not yet accumulated enough evidence to stop. The account was presented as a convenience. His name was on it so he could help me manage it if I needed anything, transfer money in if I ever had an emergency, that kind of thing. I thought of his access as theoretical, a backup, something that existed in case but would never need to be used. It was used extensively, not immediately, not in the first year or the second. I didn't check the account often because I was adding to it regularly, and I knew the general shape of what was there, and I had set up automatic deposits from my paycheck that I didn't think about. The account was doing what it was supposed to do, growing, slowly, steadily, the way savings grow when you are disciplined and patient. I was not watching it closely. That was the window he needed. I graduated college at 22 and got a job in supply chain management at a logistics company 40 minutes from my hometown. I rented a one-bedroom apartment, kept my expenses tight, and increased my savings deposits as my salary grew. By 25, I had a clear timeline for the house deposit. By 27, I was close enough that I had started looking at listings. Nothing serious yet, just watching the market, understanding what my money would get me in the areas I was considering. I was proud of that timeline. Not in a way I talked about much, but internally, privately, in the way you are proud of something that has cost you real discipline over real years. I had said no to a lot of things to keep that account growing. Vacations I didn't take. A car upgrade I deferred, concerts and dinners and the small daily luxuries that other people my age spent freely on. Every time I said no to something, I thought about the account and the house and the door with my name on it. I spoke to my father occasionally. Not often. Our relationship had settled in my mid-20s into a kind of careful distance that suited both of us. We had dinner a few times a year. He called on birthdays. We talked about surface things and avoided the deeper ones, and the arrangement was functional if not warm. I did not think about the account when I talked to him. I did not think about the account at all, really, except as a number I checked occasionally and felt good about. I did not know that while I was feeling good about the number was being quietly reduced. 43 withdrawals over 47 months. The smallest was $380. The largest was $1,180. The average was just over $1,500. I would work that out later, precisely, sitting at the same kitchen table with a calculator and the printed statements I would eventually request from the bank. But on that Sunday afternoon in February, doing my taxes and cross-referencing my savings deposits with my actual balance, what I knew was that the number was wrong. Not a little wrong, $67,000 wrong. I did not panic immediately. I want to tell you that because people expect panic, and what actually happened was the opposite. A strange, cold settling, like a temperature drop, like the room getting sharper rather than blurring. I went through the statements methodically. I had the last 8 months pulled up already for the taxes. I requested the prior years from the bank's online portal, which took about 10 minutes and a verification code sent to my phone. I printed everything, 47 months of statements, spread across my kitchen table in chronological order, and I went through them with a pen and circled every withdrawal that hadn't been me. It took 2.5 hours. When I was done, I had a page of circled entries and a total at the bottom that I had written and crossed out and rewritten 3 times, because each time I wanted to make sure I had added it correctly. $67,420. I sat with that number for a long time. I thought about what $67,420 was. It was more than a full year of my salary. It was the house deposit I had been building for 4 years, and then some. It was every vacation I hadn't taken, and every car upgrade I had deferred, and every concert I had said no to because I was being disciplined and patient and building towards something real. It was gone. and there was only one person who had access to the account other than me. I picked up my phone. I called my father. I need to stop here for a moment, because I want to tell you what I was feeling when I dialed that number. Not because the feeling is the story, but because I think some of you have been in a version of this. The moment you realize the person who was supposed to protect you has been doing the opposite. And I want to name it honestly. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was something colder and more disorienting than rage. It was the specific feeling of a foundation shifting, of looking at a person you have known your entire life and understanding that the version of them you held in your mind has to be rebuilt from scratch, because the one you had was wrong in a way that changes everything you thought you knew. Has someone you trusted ever taken something from you so carefully that you almost didn't notice? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do that now, because what my father said when I told him what I had found is the thing that changed everything that came after. He answered on the third ring. He sounded normal. That was the first thing I noticed. The particular easy normalcy of someone who doesn't know they've been found out. Sunday evening relaxed. Slightly distracted the way he always sounded when he was watching something on television and answering the phone at the same time. Dana, what's up? I need to ask you something. Something in my voice must have registered because his shifted slightly. Not alarmed, just attentive. Sure, what is it? I've been going through my savings account statements, the joint one on Cartwright. A pause, brief, the length of someone recalibrating. Okay, he said. There are 43 withdrawals over the last 4 years that weren't me. Silence. Dad, I can explain $67,420. I said the number clearly, the way I had practiced saying it in my head during the 2 hours it had taken me to request the statements and go through them. That's the total. I've checked it 3 times. The silence on his end had a different quality now. Denser. Not the silence of someone thinking, but the silence of someone who has been caught and is deciding what shape to take. I was going to pay it back, he said. 4 words I had heard before in different contexts, from different people, and which had never once preceded the paying back of anything. When? I asked. I've been having a hard time, Dana. The business... When were you going to pay it back? When things turned around. I've been working on... You've been withdrawing from my account for 4 years. My voice was steady. I had decided before I called that I was going to be steady, that he was not going to get the version of me that was shaking. That's not a hard time. That's a decision you made 43 times. It wasn't like that. What was it like? He shifted. I could hear him moving, the creak of a chair, the particular restless sound of someone who needs to physically rearrange themselves because the conversation won't rearrange. I needed it. I was going to replace it. I didn't think you were checking it that closely. That last sentence. I didn't think you were checking it that closely. Not, I'm sorry. Not, I was wrong. Not even an attempt at the performance of remorse. Just the acknowledgement that the plan had depended on me not noticing. That the 43 withdrawals spaced carefully across 47 months had been calibrated to stay beneath my threshold of attention. You did this on purpose, I said. The amounts, the spacing. Dana, you thought about how to do it so I wouldn't notice. A pause. Then quieter. I needed the money. It wasn't your money. I'm your father. That's not an answer. His voice changed. I had heard this change before, growing up. It was the shift from managed to something harder underneath, the place he went when he felt cornered and chose offense over accountability. I raised you, he said. Everything I gave you over 29 years, the house, the food, the education, everything. You think that was free? You think parents don't spend their lives giving and giving with nothing in return? I held the phone against my ear. I needed help, and you had money sitting there, and you're my daughter. That's what family does. Family doesn't steal from each other. I didn't steal. His voice had an edge now. I borrowed. From my own daughter. who I raised, who wouldn't have that money or that job or that apartment if I hadn't spent 20 years making sure she had what she needed. The words landed with a weight I had not fully prepared for, not because they were true, but because they were delivered with the absolute conviction of someone who had rehearsed them, possibly for years, possibly for exactly this conversation. He had thought about how to justify this. He had built the argument in advance. "You're saying I owe you $67,000 for raising me," I said. "I'm saying family helps family. By taking money from an account without telling me. By surviving Dana. I was surviving, and I used what was available because what other choice did I have?" I let the question sit there without answering it, because there were many answers and none of them were the point. "I have to go," I said. "Dana, don't be like this. We can work something out. I'll call you when I'm ready to talk again." I hung up. I put the phone face down on the kitchen table beside the printed statements and the page of circled entries and the number written 3 times at the bottom. I sat in the quiet of my apartment for a long time. Outside, the February dark had come in fully. The street below was empty. My downstairs neighbor was watching something with a laugh track that came up through the floor in muffled bursts. I thought about the account on Cartwright Avenue. The afternoon I was 19, and my father sat beside me at the desk and told the banker we were there to open a savings account for his daughter. The easy confidence, the firm handshake, the way the banker had smiled and processed the paperwork, and how normal and right it had all seemed. I thought about every withdrawal. $380, $650, $800. 43 of them. 43 separate decisions, made over 47 months, each one deliberate, each one calibrated, each one relying on me not looking too closely. I thought about what he had said. "You owe me for raising you." I thought about that sentence for a long time. And then I opened my laptop and started working. I am going to tell you what I did that night. Not because I planned it all in advance. I didn't. I made decisions one at a time, each one following naturally from the last, and by midnight I had done everything that needed to be done. The first call was to the bank. Not to the branch, but to the fraud line, the number on the back of my card that I had never used before. I reported unauthorized withdrawals from the joint account. I explained that the other account holder had been making withdrawals without my knowledge or consent. I provided the statement dates and amounts. The woman on the phone was calm and professional and walked me through the process without judgment. She told me the account would be flagged and his access suspended pending investigation. She told me I could come into the branch on Monday morning to formally remove him from the account. She told me to keep all my printed documentation. I said I would. The second thing I did was call my mother. It was late, nearly 10, but she answered immediately the way she always answered my late calls. With the particular attention of someone who knows that late calls from her daughter mean something has happened. I told her everything. From the beginning, from the spreadsheet and the circled entries and the number at the bottom, through to the phone call and what he had said at the end. She listened without interrupting, which was hard for her because she had opinions about my father that were well-founded and long-standing, and which she had spent years being careful not to impose on me. When I finished, she said, "How much of this did you already know, somewhere underneath?" I sat with that question. "Enough," I said finally. "I think I knew enough not to look too closely." She was quiet for a moment. "That's not your fault." "I know." "Are you okay?" "Not yet," I said. "But I know what to do, which is close enough for tonight." The third thing I did was open every account, document, and legal arrangement in my life, and go through them looking for his name. My primary checking account, his name was not on it. Good. My car insurance, listed as an emergency contact, not a named party. I updated the emergency contact to my mother. My lease, not on it. My health insurance through work, not on it. My investment account, which I had opened 2 years ago and which held a modest but growing amount, I checked the beneficiary designation. His name was there. I changed it to my mother. My will. I had made a simple one at 25 with an online service, One of those things you do when you're being responsible and then don't think about again. He was listed as executor. I made a note to call an attorney on Monday and have that changed. By midnight, I had gone through everything I could access that night and removed or flagged everything that had his name on it or gave him any form of access or authority. Then I made a document, a clean, factual record of everything I had found. The dates, the amounts, the total, the phone call, and what he had said. I saved it in 3 places and emailed a copy to myself and printed a copy and put it in the folder with the bank statements. Then I closed my laptop. I sat in the quiet of my apartment and I breathed. I was not okay. But I was standing on something solid, which was the closest thing to okay that was available that night. Monday morning, I was at the bank on Cartwright Avenue when it opened at 9. I had been to this branch 3 times in 10 years, twice to handle routine things. Once with my father, the afternoon we opened the account. I recognized the layout, the particular institutional carpet, the arrangement of the desks. Nothing had changed. I asked to speak to the branch manager. Her name was Diane Kowalski. She was in her late 40s, efficient and direct, the kind of person who gets to the point without being unkind about it. I sat across from her desk, and I placed the printed statements in front of her, and I told her what I had found and what I had reported to the fraud line the night before. She pulled up the account. She reviewed the withdrawal history. She was quiet for a moment in the way of someone who was looking at something and forming a professional assessment. "These withdrawals span 4 years," she said. "Yes. And you weren't aware of them?" "Not individually. I wasn't monitoring the account closely enough to see the pattern. When I added them up for my taxes, it became clear." She looked at the total I had written at the bottom of the summary page. She did not visibly react, which told me she had seen versions of this before. "You want to remove the joint account holder," she said. "Yes, and I want to understand what options I have." She told me. Because it was a joint account and not a sole account, his withdrawals were technically authorized by the account structure. Both parties had full access under the agreement. The fraud designation I had filed would trigger a review, but the outcome was not guaranteed. What I could do immediately was remove him from the account going forward, which she processed while I sat there. What I could do additionally was pursue the matter through civil channels, meaning a lawsuit, which would require documentation and an attorney. "I have documentation," I said. She looked at the folder I had placed on her desk. "I can see that. What would you recommend?" She paused in the careful way of someone who is choosing their words within the limits of their professional role. "I would recommend speaking to an attorney who handles financial disputes. What you've brought in today is thorough. That matters." I thanked her. She processed the removal of his name from the account. She gave me new account numbers and a new card and updated all the security credentials. When I left the bank on Cartwright Avenue at 10:15 that morning, the account was mine alone for the first time since I was 19 years old. I stood on the sidewalk outside for a moment. It was cold, one of those February mornings that is technically sunny but provides no warmth, the sky bright and the air cutting. I stood there and I breathed it in, and I felt something I hadn't felt in the 20 hours since I had opened the spreadsheet. Not relief, not yet. More like ground, solid ground. Mine. My father called 4 times on Monday. I let all 4 go to voicemail. His messages ranged across a predictable spectrum. The first was reasonable and slightly conciliatory. He understood I was upset. Could we talk? The second was more urgent. He had been notified by the bank that his access had been suspended and he needed to discuss this immediately. The third was the one I had been expecting, the one that arrived when the reasonable and the urgent had failed. His voice lower and harder, saying I was being irrational, that I was blowing something out of proportion, that families worked things out and didn't go running to banks and make things official over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. $67,420 and 43 withdrawals across 47 months was being described, in a voicemail from my father, as a misunderstanding. The fourth message was different, quieter. Something had shifted between the third call and the fourth. Some calculation had been made, and what came out of it was a voice I hadn't heard from him often. Not the managed voice and not the hard voice. Something smaller than both. He said, "Dana, I know I've done something that can't be undone easily. I'm asking you to give me the chance to explain in person, not to argue, not to make excuses, just to talk. Please." I listened to that one 3 times. Then I called my mother and played it to her over the phone. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That's his real voice. He uses it when he's run out of other options." I knew she was right. I also knew that the real voice being his last resort didn't make it false. People can be genuine and strategic at the same time. My father had always been both. "What do you think I should do?" I asked. "I think you should talk to a lawyer before you talk to him," she said. "And I think after that it's up to you." I found an attorney through a referral from a colleague who had gone through a financial dispute with a former business partner 2 years earlier. Her name was Patricia Holt. She had a small office in a building downtown with a waiting room that smelled like coffee and old paper and a manner that was brisk without being cold. I brought everything: the printed statements, the summary document, the record of the phone call, the voicemail saved to my phone. She went through it in silence, page by page, with the focused attention of someone reading something carefully for the first time and forming a view. When she finished, she looked up. "This is well documented," she said. "I work in supply chain," I said. "I'm used to keeping records." Something like approval moved across her face. "The account structure complicates things. Both names on a joint account means both parties technically have withdrawal rights under the agreement you signed. His withdrawals were unauthorized in spirit, but not necessarily in legal structure. So he can take $67,000 from my account, and there's nothing I can do." "I didn't say that." She set the papers down. "The account structure is one consideration. His statement to you on the phone is another. His acknowledgement that he took the money, that he did so without your knowledge, and his justification, that you owe him for raising you, is relevant. What you have here is a paper trail and an admission. Civil court is a realistic option." "What would that look like?" she told me. "A lawsuit for recovery of the withdrawn funds." Given the documentation and the phone call, which I had not recorded but had written down in detail within an hour of it happening, which she said was the next best thing, she believed the case was strong. She could not guarantee an outcome. She could tell me the documentation was significantly better than what she typically saw in cases like this. "Cases like this," I said. "Parents taking money from children." She paused. "It happens more than people think, and it almost always goes undiscovered because the child trusts the parent and doesn't look closely at joint accounts." I thought about that on the drive home. How many other people were sitting with accounts that had his name or someone like him on them, not looking closely because trust was supposed to mean you didn't have to. I met my father 2 weeks after the Sunday I found the statements, not at his house and not at mine. At a coffee shop in a part of the city neither of us had particular association with. Neutral ground, which was my condition, along with 2 others. He would let me speak without interrupting, and he would not bring anyone with him. He agreed to all 3. He was already there when I arrived, which surprised me. My father was constitutionally late to things. It was one of the small signals of his worldview, the belief that his time was more valuable than other people's, and that arrival could therefore be adjusted according to his comfort. Seeing him already seated, hands around a cup, watching the door, told me something about how the 2 weeks had gone for him. He looked older than I remembered. Not dramatically, not in a way that would have been obvious if I saw him every week, but I hadn't seen him in 4 months, and in those 4 months something had shifted in his face. A heaviness around the eyes, a quality of, not defeat exactly, but something adjacent to it. The look of a man who has been sitting with something uncomfortable for long enough that it has started to show. I sat down across from him. He didn't speak immediately, which was unusual. He waited, which told me he had prepared for this, had thought about how to approach it, had decided that waiting was the right opening. I'm not here to negotiate, I said. I want you to understand that before we start. He nodded. I'm here because you asked me to let you speak, and I decided to give you that. Not because I owe it to you. Because I want to hear what you have to say, and I want to say what I have to say, and then I want to know what kind of relationship, if any, we have from here. He nodded again. Okay, I said, go ahead. He talked for about 20 minutes. He told me about the business, a franchise investment he had made 6 years ago that had looked solid on paper and had not been solid in practice. He told me about the slow deterioration of it, the years of trying to keep it viable, the money he had put in and lost. He told me about the gap between what he owed and what he had, and how that gap had grown, and the decisions he had made to manage it, and how those decisions had led him, 3.5 years ago, to look at the joint account he had access to and make the first withdrawal. He told me he had told himself it was temporary, that he would replace it, that he would tell me eventually when things were better and it would be something we laughed about, a moment of shared difficulty that had passed. He told me things had not gotten better. He told me he had kept withdrawing because stopping would have meant telling me, and telling me meant this conversation. When he finished, I was quiet for a moment. You spent 4 years choosing the conversation you wanted to avoid over the money you were taking from me, I said. Yes. Every time you took money out of that account, you made a choice about my future, my house, the years I spent being careful and disciplined to build toward something specific. You knew what the account was for. I knew. And you took it anyway. Yes. His voice was flat, not emotionless, just stripped of the layers he usually kept over things. I took it anyway. I looked at him across the table. My father, 61 years old, sitting in a coffee shop with his hands around a cup and a face that had aged in 2 weeks, and an admission on the table between us that couldn't be taken back. On the phone, I said, you told me I owed you for raising me. He looked down. Did you mean that? A long pause. I meant it in the moment, he said finally. I was cornered, and I reached for the thing that would make me feel less cornered. It wasn't true. It was the ugliest version of something I had been telling myself to make the withdrawals feel less like what they were. What were they? He met my eyes. Taking from my daughter, he said, without her knowledge, without her consent. That's what they were. That was the sentence I had come for. Not forgiveness, not a plan, not a negotiation. That sentence, said plainly, without the architecture of justification around it. I sat with it. I've spoken to an attorney, I said. He nodded slowly. I expected that. She believes I have a strong case for civil recovery. I know. I haven't decided whether to pursue it. He looked up. I'm telling you so you understand that I have options, I said, and that I'm choosing right now to sit here and have this conversation instead of exercising them immediately. That's a choice I'm making, not out of obligation, not because you're my father, because I want to give this one conversation the chance to be real before I decide what comes next. He was quiet for a moment. What do you need from me? He asked. The truth about whether you can pay it back. A pause. Not all at once. Over time? If you give me time, yes. I believe I can. That belief would need to be documented, I said. A formal repayment agreement. Monthly amounts. Signed, notarized. Not a conversation, a document. Okay. And if you miss a payment or dispute the terms or disappear from the agreement, I file the civil case that morning. Okay? I looked at him. I don't know what our relationship looks like from here, I said. I don't know if there is one. I'm not deciding that today. I'm deciding today whether to give you the chance to pay back what you took before I take it to court. And? He asked quietly. And I'm going to give you that chance. Not because I trust you. Because I want to see who you choose to be when the money is the only thing left. He nodded. We didn't hug when we left. We didn't shake hands. I picked up my bag and my coat and I walked to the door and he said my name once, quietly, and I turned. I'm sorry, Dana, he said. I know what that's worth right now. I know it's not much, but I mean it. I looked at him for a moment. "Show me," I said. Then I walked out into the February cold and got in my car and sat in the parking lot for a while before I drove home. Patricia Holt drafted the repayment agreement, $1,400 a month, structured over 4 years, with a clause that triggered the civil case automatically if 3 consecutive payments were missed or if the terms were disputed without cause. She reviewed it with him through his own attorney. I insisted he have one, not because I wanted the process to be adversarial, but because I needed the agreement to be made between 2 informed parties, rather than between a lawyer and an unrepresented man who could later claim he hadn't understood what he signed. He signed it. The first payment arrived on the 15th of March. I saw it in my account, and I sat with it for a moment, and I felt something I had not expected to feel. Not relief, not satisfaction. Something quieter. Something that recognized the distance between where things had been on that Sunday afternoon in February and where they were now, and understood that the distance had been traveled entirely by my own effort. Nobody had fixed this for me. No outside party had arrived with information I hadn't found myself. No lawyer my grandmother had hired, no document discovered by chance. Just me at my kitchen table doing my taxes, adding up numbers that told a story I had needed to read. I had read it. And then I had done every single thing that needed doing. It has been 7 months since that Sunday. My father has made 7 payments, every 15th, without delay, without prompting. I do not know if this means he has changed. I know it means he is doing what the agreement requires. That is not nothing, and it is not everything, and I am holding it at exactly that weight. We have spoken twice since the coffee shop, both times short, practical, related to the agreement. The conversations have been careful and a little formal, the conversations of 2 people who are still deciding what they are to each other and have agreed not to rush the decision. My mother says, give it time. She is right about most things. Caleb called me in April. He had heard some version of the story, not from me, which meant my father had told him something, which meant the story was in the family now, in whatever shape my father had given it. Caleb and I have always been on reasonable terms without being close, and the call had the slight awkwardness of someone navigating a conversation they hadn't fully prepared for. He said, "Is it true, what Dad did?" "Yes," I said. "All of it, the amount?" "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. "I didn't know." "I know you didn't." "I'm sorry, Dana." "Thank you." We talked for a few more minutes about nothing in particular and said goodbye. It was not a dramatic conversation. It was just honest, which was enough. The house. I want to tell you about the house because it is the part of the story that matters most to me, more than the repayment agreement, or the conversation in the coffee shop, or the 7 payments that have arrived on the 15th. I have not bought one yet. The $67,000 will take 4 years to come back, and the market has moved since I started watching it, and the timeline has shifted. But I am still watching. I still have the folder of listings I started 2 years ago. I still look at it sometimes, adding new ones, removing ones that have sold, following the neighborhoods I like. It is a smaller thing than it sounds, and a larger thing than it sounds at the same time. It is the goal that was taken from me, and that I am in the process of taking back. 4 years is not forever, and the door, when I finally walk through it, will have a key that nobody else has a copy of. That was always the point. I want to say something about the sentence my father said on the phone that Sunday evening. "You owe me for raising you." I have thought about that sentence more than any other part of this, not because it hurt the most, though it did, because it is the sentence that reveals the most about how this had been possible for 4 years. My father had built, inside himself, a ledger. Not a conscious one, not one he could have written out and defended in detail. But a ledger nonetheless, one that had been accumulating for years. One that held on one side every sacrifice and expenditure of parenthood, and on the other side, a debt he had decided I owed him for it. And when he needed money and the account was there and accessible, the ledger told him it was acceptable. It told him he was collecting on something that was owed. The ledger was wrong, I know that. He knows it too, I think, in the way people know things when they can no longer avoid them. But I want to name it clearly because I think versions of this ledger exist in a lot of families, not always with the financial consequences this one had. The belief that love given creates obligation owed, that the work of raising a child is a transaction that the child inherits without agreeing to the terms. That family gives you the right to take things you haven't been offered. It doesn't. Love given freely does not become a debt. Care provided because it was the right thing to provide does not create an account the other person owes you access to. And whatever you gave, whatever you sacrificed, whatever the years cost you, it does not entitle you to walk quietly into your daughter's future and take $1,180 at a time until there is nothing left. That is not family. That is the opposite of it. And knowing the difference, understanding clearly where the line is the thing I am taking from this that nobody can withdraw. If someone has access to something of yours, your money, your trust, your future, and you have not been looking closely, I want you to hear me. Look closely, not from paranoia, from self-respect, from the understanding that the people who love you should be able to withstand your scrutiny. And the ones who can't, the ones who have been counting on you not to look, deserve to be looked at most of all. That is what I have learned, and it cost $67,420 to learn it. I intend to get every dollar back. Tell me in the comments, has someone ever taken something from you that they justified as being owed? I want to hear from you, and if this story found you when you needed it, share it with someone who might need to look a little more closely at the numbers. I'll see you next time.